Professor Penelope Haralambidou is a professor at UCL, University College London, Bartlett School of Architecture. She has been researching cinema architecture, but also professional practice, and it's quite her research is quite deep and wide so in relation to architecture. So she has a very long CV here, so it's better if she elaborates on her research herself. So welcome, Penelope, and welcome to section 3. And thank you very much, Chris, for the wonderful presentation. I find this extremely interesting. So I'm the director of the Construction Blockchain Consortium here at UCL, but for the industry. And we have a number of members in our steering committee, people like, for instance, Richard Saxon, who is the chair of the JCT. And we work with the NEC as well, and also with the industry, with IBM and Oracle, Autodesk, Bentley Systems, etc. And this is an extremely hot topic: smart contracts, blockchain, decentralized applications. And although we believe we've passed this hype, the peak of hype of blockchain, there is still intense discussion about how we can apply smart contracts in the real world, how we can automate processes in the practice of architecture, engineering, all the different consultancies within the construction sector, but also the construction process itself. And it's just wonderful to see a presentation like this, because with quite familiar examples, we can see how transformative this thing can be. Do you agree with the 2027 deadline for decentralized autonomous organization to take over?
I think a small proportion of us do that. There is a tipping point coming when the public will become more literate about the opportunities that distributed and decentralized economies, cultures, and social practices are better at governance toward better lifestyles than centralized. Now, having said that, you've got to account for society. Society is made up of my parents, who are post-war kids. They're in their late 70s, and they believe in centralization with their whole heart. They believe in state. I think they even have aspirations that the Queen has a role to play in our identity. Then there's a bunch of us in the middle who went through the breakdown of modernity, if you like, and think that, hang on, the modern project failed on many levels to represent different aspects of society, from minerals to animals. It's largely an extractive project, modernity. And then there's a whole bunch of new kids on the block who are entirely born digitals, who have invested their lifestyle and only know aspects of decentralized practice, and they manifest themselves. So I think, in truth, a growing number, but you will not get rid of the bulge, mature people who believe in centralized systems, because they understand sovereignty as something which is unfortunately given to them, as opposed to a next generation who think they might develop an agency themselves. So I think it's a nice aspiration, but it's one that hasn't got a single date. It's something as a paradigm that will move and develop. And it's expressed through the COVID stuff at the moment.
Yes.
Decentralized or centralized app. People often will find that they'll align themselves with very particular imaginaries or ideologies.
Yes, that's incredible. I wonder what happens with this transition period, how we protect communities, the ones that are left out, and also how we create new opportunities. But I please don't answer that. I think Penelope has a question, so it's more important that she takes over now.
Oh, did I?
No, I thought, it's because you went full screen, so I think you have a question.
Oh, no, I probably I created the sound. I was thinking, actually, though, when you were just talking, and it's probably a bit more about this centralization and decentralization, because and whether maybe it's a question of shift of centers, because I think that in the beginning with Facebook, everyone thought that there was a sense of decentralizing, but in effect, we're finding more and more that this has become a different type of center. So it might not be a state-driven center, but still quite potent. So I was wondering about these dangers involved in these systems, and how they might be originally seen as something that is driven by the public and independently, but then they can also very easily be taken on by centers. So whether you had any comments about that?
Yeah, sure. No, I think you're absolutely right. In the end, I do think most of these things will move toward business models with the best will in the world. Facebook is a business model. As I say, I think a building is a business model, and therefore the bottom lines in Scotland, we talk about a triple bottom line: a social, an environmental, and a economic bottom line. But there is no other bottom line in Facebook other than economic. The Amazon bottom line is entirely economic. So although Amazon looks like a highly decentralized, clever business model, in fact, its interests are wholly economic, and we'll find that it will extract social, cultural value from many of those things that we identify as having qualities that perhaps centralized imperatives can imbue. Libraries. I mean, libraries are particularly centralized in my local government, and they're managed really by the local councils. And they are a manifestation of an ideological project toward the values of politics and democracy, toward let's keep and let's retain the fair inclusion of many more people. If I left it to Amazon to manage libraries, wow, they would just be marketplaces. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Thinking about this of decentering, recentering, and shifting as centers is much better than a simple argument of a binary. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this question of value that you bring in is actually key, isn't it? And whether value is measured through economic systems or whether it lies in different structures.
Yeah, I think, and forgive me for saying, maybe the Bartlett does it better because you've got a stronger connection perhaps with economic departments, but I don't think designers are exposed to nearly enough concepts of economics and how value and values are played out. I think, unfortunately, my design school tends toward a very artifact-centered idea of economy that they hope scales of production will allow them to perform the thing that they should have been. A designer should produce, and scales of production will allow them to have identity and value in the world, when actually they're wholly flawed because we're not understanding the extractive nature of modern systems. The very idea that product designers is really problematic. So yeah, I'd love us to have more confidence talking about value, that we could then reintroduce and reinscribe it.
Someone to mention here is Mariana Mazzucato, UCL's Mariana Mazzucato, and her book The Value of Everything, and the role that she had into questioning these systems.
And we see the donut, and donut economics. And someone said to me last week that although the designers have got double diamonds and program models, do all of the students have an economic model? Mm-hmm. And if they had these type of new economic models, maybe we could ask them to design with a little bit more, not responsibility, but more creativity, because they would see that they would be part of these new productions of space, if you like.
Yes. Okay. Interesting. We have a question here from the audience. A question from Oliver Green. So, do you believe the business model of unlimited data mining in the name of ever better advertising has a long and successful future ahead of it?
It's interesting. Yeah, and we do see people like, well, I think that's really interesting because you have to ask yourself, what is the value of data? If you accept that the value of data involves values, so if the value of my data involves the identity of my daughter in a business model, then of course that's a contravention of a value proposition. So if I suddenly find that my daughter, who's only 14, is being represented through the data that Facebook has captured, then of course Apple want to offer a different value proposition, because the value of my data, it might be more commensurate with my personal social values. So I think, yeah, very, very good question, because I think it's a little bit of a rhetorical question, because you knew that it's entirely that the standing up a digital economy in the last 20 years, and it's only 20 years old, is very, very immature, and it's now struggling to understand the value of data and how we begin to add values to it. And we have a great question in the lab, which is, if you change the representation of value from money to data, does it allow you to represent more values? And we tend to think that if you handle data responsibly, you can represent more values than just thinking about the dollar as the primary representation, because unfortunately that's in certain hands already. So
Yes.
yeah, good question. And
Okay. Chris, I'm aware of the time. Yeah, I think you have, if you have,
class, yeah.
yeah, you have to go and lecture. Yeah, so you're very welcome to stay in the call and see the first paper, etc., or check it from your mobile. The link will be there. But I just want to once again thank you very much for making the time to be here, and thank you for advising on this conference, and hopefully see you again soon. Any other questions, etc., I will direct to you via email, etc. If you want to take those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the invite. It's really good. I said I did the PhD in architecture, and I'm always curious of how it does or doesn't find ways to engage in these challenging ethical conversations around data. Thanks very much, folks.
Thank you,
Cheers.
Chris.
Bye.
Bye bye.